Winter squash is one of my favorites, and my particular favorite is butternut. We're going to use butternut squash today to make a tortilla and butternut soup that you are going to love. It's got a little bit of twist to it. So let's go ahead and get started. It's got a little complicated steps to it, but it's still pretty easy. Okay, we're taking 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and we're just melting that in the bottom of a Dutch oven. Now, while that's melting, let me turn up the heat just a little bit on that. We're going to go ahead and add our harder vegetables. We're going to start, though, with our garlic. So just go ahead and mince the garlic right into the pot. I'm going to use about 3 cloves just because they're of varying sizes. And we're just going to melt that in there with the butter. But you want the garlic to be on the bottom of your Dutch oven, so put it in first. Okay, after you've got that in there, we're going to add our onions, and we've got 2 cups of chopped onions that we're going to add to that. That's about 1 large onion if you don't want to have to measure that. Then we're going to add 3 stalks of chopped celery. If you don't like celery, you can substitute bell peppers for that. Use the green ones for it. And then we're going to add our butternut squash. So this is the chopped up flesh of butternut squash. You can substitute another winter squash for this if you want to. But you'll see the cube size that I've got it in. So it's just in large dice. And this is 1 large 1 pound butternut squash. So the poundage is what you need to be looking at. Okay, we're going to add that to this, and we're going to allow that to kind of saute for about 10 minutes. Now, oh, I forgot our carrots. We can't forget that. We're going to add our carrots as well. So a little bit more orange. The same thing, 3 large carrot stalks, just like your celery, so keep in mind 3 for that. We're going to saute these vegetables for 10 minutes. Now, let's talk about winter squash, because a lot of times people will avoid recipes using winter squash just because these are so large and cumbersome and sometimes very difficult to cut. So I've got a little trick for you. If you will take the whole squash, the whole winter squash, and if it's a very big one, you might need to take a rack out of your oven, but just lay this on an ungreased pan in your oven and put it on about 350 degrees, stick it in the oven for about 20 minutes, and that will soften this flesh up just enough so that it's much easier to cut. So make sure it cools down so that you can touch it really easily. Then you can easily cut it, scoop out the seeds, and use it. We're going to add our liquid for the soup. So we're going to add a cup of dry red wine, and then we're going to add chicken stock or vegetable stock. If you want to keep this vegetarian, use vegetable stock. So we're going to add 11 cups of stock and 1 cup of Tennessee dry red wine. Now, the type that I used for this is a Merlot. You can use a Cab for that if you want to. Just make sure it's dry and red. It's going to add the color and the depth of flavor for that. Then we're going to bring this to a boil and allow this to cook for about 35 minutes because we want to soften up all of that winter squash and vegetables that are in your soup. Now here comes the unusual part. We're going to take tortilla chips and we're going to add this to our soup. You can crush them a little bit with your hand as you add them to that. And we're going to get these nice and soft. I know, it seems a little strange, but stick with me here. Okay, so about 8 ounces of tortilla chips of your choice. Then we're going to add some cilantro leaves and 2 cups of shredded cheese. And I'm using some shredded mozzarella for this. Excuse me, you could use Monterey Jack if you want to. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of pepper, about 1/4 of a teaspoon. Now we're going to let that kind of melt, let the cheese melt, and let the tortilla chips kind of soften in this. This is a little backwards than what you're used to, because we're used to garnishing this with tortilla chips. But just hang with me with this. Okay, you can see how they've kind of softened up a little bit and the cheese has melted. And now we're going to turn off our heat and we're going to use an immersion blender. Okay, if you don't have an immersion blender, all hope is not lost, but you would need to let this cool down completely and puree this in your blender. But it needs to be cooled down completely or you're going to have a kitchen mess on your hands. So an immersion blender is made exactly for what we're going to do. So all it does is it is able to immerse down into your soup. Okay, our soup is nice and smooth. And now we're going to add a little bit of texture to this. So we got a 4-ounce can of chopped green chilies that we're going to add to that. Some hot sauce. Got to add a little bit of punch to this. We're going to add some lime juice, 2 tablespoons. And then we're going to add some chopped green onions to that. And just stir that in. And it's ready. It's ready. It's fun. We're going to garnish this with just a little bit of blue corn chips and some sour cream, maybe a lime wedge, and you've got a delicious butternut and tortilla soup that's a little bit different than what you're used to.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel and like us on Facebook.